Pack your things and leave this house immediately. Don't tell your son anything." The plumber's words still echoed in my ears as I stared out my kitchen window. That morning had started like any other. Coffee steamed in my favorite white porcelain mug, the one with little flowers that had belonged to my mother. Sunbeams filtered through the curtains, illuminating dust particles dancing in the air. My home was my sanctuary. Every corner held a story, every object a memory. The cream-colored walls I had painted myself 3 years ago, the dark wood furniture inherited from my parents. Everything seemed perfect, orderly, peaceful. David had left early for work, as always. My oldest son had a habit of disappearing before dawn and returning after dark. He worked for a construction company, though lately he seemed more tired and distant than usual. His eyes avoided mine during dinner. Rachel, my younger daughter, had moved back home 5 months ago after her divorce. 35 years old and back in the nest, bringing with her 2 suitcases and a sadness that seemed to cling to her skin. She spent hours locked in her old room, coming out only for quick meals before shutting herself away again. I had lost my husband 6 years ago, and for a long time my world had fallen apart. But my children had been there, holding me up. So when they needed me, I opened my arms and my home without questions. The routine had become predictable. I would wake at 6 in the morning, make breakfast no one ate, clean the house, and make dinner we ate in silence. The days blurred into one another like watercolors in the rain. But that morning, something had changed. The upstairs bathroom faucet had started dripping during the night. It wasn't a normal drip, but something strange, as if the water was coming from somewhere it shouldn't. When I came down for breakfast, I noticed a damp spot on the dining room ceiling, right below the upstairs bathroom. Water was seeping through slowly, forming a small drop that fell onto the table every few seconds. It was strange because the upstairs bathroom had been renovated just 18 months ago. David had insisted on replacing all the plumbing, hiring a full team of workers who were in the house for weeks. I called David at work to ask what I should do. "Mom, just call a plumber. I can't leave work right now." "But shouldn't you check the warranty on the renovation?" No, it's better to call someone new. I'll send you the number of a plumber I know." His answer seemed odd. Why didn't he want us to contact the company that did the original work? But I didn't push it. David had been especially irritable lately. Half an hour later, I received a text with the name and number of Jim Carter. I dialed immediately. A calm, professional voice answered, and within an hour, he was at my door. A man in his 50s, medium height with graying hair and kind eyes behind glasses. He wore blue overalls and carried a well-worn toolbox. "Mrs. Hayes, I'm Jim Carter, the plumber." I led him to the dining room and showed him the spot on the ceiling. He looked up, frowned slightly, and nodded. "I'll need to check the upstairs bathroom first, then the basement to look at the main pipes." Jim went upstairs, and soon I heard the sound of his tools at work. After a few minutes, he came down with a thoughtful expression. "Ma'am, I need to check the basement." "The door is in the kitchen. Do you need me to come with you?" "That's not necessary. This might take a while." Something in his tone made me nervous. I couldn't say what exactly, but there was a tension in his voice that hadn't been there when he arrived. Jim disappeared through the basement door, and silence filled the house. I could only hear the metallic sounds of his tools echoing from below. The noises continued for almost an hour. Occasionally I would hear him moving around, dragging something heavy, gently tapping pipes. The sound of footsteps coming up from the basement interrupted my thoughts. Jim appeared in the kitchen, but something about his appearance had changed. His face had lost its color, and his hands trembled slightly as he closed his toolbox. "Are you finished? Did you find the problem?" Jim looked at me strangely, as if evaluating something in my face. His eyes darted nervously between my face and the basement door. "Mrs. Hayes, I need to talk to you. Can we sit down for a moment?" His tone had changed completely. There was an urgency in his voice, a tension that immediately put me on alert. "Of course. Is everything all right? Is the leak serious?" "It's not exactly a leak, ma'am." He sat across from me at the kitchen table, placed his tools on the floor, and took off his glasses to clean them nervously. His hands were still shaking. "I don't understand. Then what's causing the dampness?" Jim was silent for a moment, as if searching for the right words. Finally, he looked me directly in the eyes. "Ma'am, do you live here alone?" "No, I live with my 2 children, David and Rachel. They're both adults, but they've temporarily moved back home." "And they have free access to the basement?" The question seemed strange. "Well, yes, it's their house too. Why do you ask?" Jim leaned forward, lowering his voice as if someone might be listening. "Mrs. Hayes, what I found down there is not a plumbing problem. Someone has installed something in the basement, something that shouldn't be there." My heart started to beat faster. "What kind of thing?" "It's complicated to explain, but what I can tell you is that it's not accidental. Someone put it there on purpose, and that someone knows this house very well." I felt as if the floor was moving beneath my feet. "Are you implying that someone broke into my house to install something in my basement?" "No, ma'am. I don't think it was a stranger." His words hung in the air between us like a toxic cloud. I couldn't fully process what he was implying. "I don't understand. What are you trying to tell me?" Jim stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the garden as if to make sure we were alone. "Ma'am, have you noticed any strange symptoms lately? Unusual fatigue, headaches, trouble sleeping?" The question took me by surprise. "Well, yes. I've been more tired than usual and I've had some headaches, but I'm an older woman. Those things are normal." "And your children, have they shown the same symptoms?" I thought for a moment. Now that he mentioned it, I hadn't noticed David or Rachel complaining of fatigue or headaches. In fact, despite Rachel's emotional problems, they both seemed to be in good physical health. "No, they seem to be fine." Jim nodded gravely, as if my answer had confirmed his suspicions. "Ma'am, I need you to listen to me very carefully. What I'm about to say will be hard for you to accept, but it's important that you believe me." He came back to the table and sat in front of me, taking my hands in his. His palms were cold and damp. "The device I found in your basement is connected to this house's ventilation system. Specifically, it's directed towards your bedroom." "My bedroom? What does that mean?" "What?" "It means someone has installed a system to release substances into the air you breathe. Substances that could be slowly making you sick." The words seemed to come from far away, as if I were hearing them through a tunnel. They couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen in real life, and definitely not in my house with my family. "That's impossible. There must be a mistake." Jim shook his head firmly. "Ma'am, I've been a plumber for over 20 years. I've seen all kinds of plumbing, ventilation, and filtration systems. What's in your basement is not an air purifier. It's something else entirely. Please, just 5 minutes. If after seeing what I'm about to show you, you still think I'm wrong, I will leave immediately and you will never hear from me again." Something in his tone stopped me. He didn't sound like a madman or someone making up stories. He sounded like a man who had seen something terrible and didn't know how to communicate it without destroying my world. "All right, but only for 5 minutes." Jim nodded and took a flashlight from his toolbox. We went down to the basement, the wooden stairs creaking under our feet. The same sound I had heard thousands of times before, but now every creak seemed sinister, like a warning. The basement had the familiar smell of dampness and age. Everything seemed normal at first. "Over here," Jim whispered, heading towards the farthest corner behind the furnace. I followed him, my eyes slowly adjusting to the dim light. Jim turned on his flashlight and aimed it at a section of the wall I rarely visited. Tucked between the normal plumbing pipes was something that definitely didn't belong there. A series of thinner tubes made of what looked like specialized plastic connected to a metal box the size of a toaster. It had several compartments. Some contained liquids of different colors. Others had what looked like digital timers with flashing red numbers. "This is connected to your house's ventilation system," Jim explained in a low voice. "Specifically, these tubes go up and connect to the air ducts that lead directly to your bedroom." I touched one of the tubes with trembling fingers. It was warm, as if it had been running recently. "What kind of liquids are those?" "I'm not a chemist, but from the smell and consistency, I'd say they are substances designed to cause gradual effects on whoever inhales them. Chronic fatigue, a weakened immune system, maybe something more serious over time." My mind refused to fully process what I was seeing, but this requires technical knowledge, a specialized installation. It's not something you can do in an afternoon. "Exactly. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing, and they had unlimited access to your house for as long as it took." I remembered the bathroom renovation from 18 months ago. The workers had been in the house for weeks. David had personally supervised the entire project, insisting I not worry about the technical details. "The renovation," I whispered. "During the bathroom renovation, there were workers here constantly. Who supervised that renovation?" I didn't want to answer. I didn't want my suspicions confirmed with words. "My son David. He took care of everything." Jim nodded gravely. "Ma'am, this system wasn't installed in 2 days. It required planning, purchasing specific materials, and someone with knowledge of ventilation and basic chemistry." Nausea rose in my throat. David works in construction. He would know how to do this. And his sister Rachel studied chemistry in college before she got married. The pieces of the puzzle began to fit together in a horrible, perfect way. The symptoms I had been experiencing for months, the constant fatigue, the headaches, the feeling of weakness I had attributed to my age, Michael's insistence on renovating the bathroom, Linda's sudden return home just as my more serious health problems began. "How long has this system been running?" I asked in a broken voice. Jim examined the digital timers. "From the wear on the components and the amount of residue in the tubes, I'd say at least 10 months. 10 months. Exactly when I had started to feel constantly sick. Exactly when I had started to think that maybe I was developing some age-related illness. "Ma'am, you need to get out of this house immediately." We went up in silence. My legs felt like jelly. When we reached the kitchen, reality hit me with renewed force. This was my home, my refuge, the place where I had raised my children, where I had mourned my husband's death, and my children had turned it into my torture chamber. "Mrs. Hayes," Jim said firmly, "listen to me very carefully. You need to take only the essentials. Get out of this house right now and not tell your children where you are going." "But I can't just leave. This is my house. They are my children." "Your children are trying to murder you," Jim said with a harshness that surprised me. "There is no conversation worth having with people who have gone this far." I looked towards the stairs leading to the upper floor. Rachel was up there, probably just waking up, planning to come down for lunch. My little Rachel, who had been such a sweet child, who had comforted me when her father died. A noise from upstairs startled me. Footsteps on the second floor. Rachel was awake. "Mom," she called from upstairs, "who are you talking to?" Jim and I looked at each other. I could see the tension in his eyes, the urgency to leave before the situation got more complicated. "Tell her I'm the plumber and I'm almost done," Jim whispered. "It's the plumber, honey. He's fixing the leak," I shouted up, trying to keep my voice normal. "Okay, I'll be down in a minute." Jim stood up immediately. "Ma'am, we need to go now. Do you have your important documents somewhere accessible?" "They're in the safe in my bedroom." "Go get them. Take only what's essential. Identification, bank papers, some clothes. I'll wait here to make sure your daughter doesn't come down." I stood up on trembling legs. Every step towards the stairs felt like walking off a cliff. I went up trying to be as quiet as possible. Though my heart was pounding so loudly, I was sure it could be heard throughout the house. My bedroom looked the same as always. But now I knew that poison was seeping into this space, specifically designed to weaken me until I died. I opened the safe with shaking hands. Inside were my most important documents. I took everything and stuffed it into a small handbag. Then I went to the closet and grabbed a few basic items of clothing. As I packed, my eyes fell on a photograph on my dresser. It was from last Christmas, just 8 months ago. David, Rachel, and I were smiling in front of the Christmas tree. David had his arm around my shoulders. Rachel was giving me a kiss on the cheek. In that photo, they looked like the loving children I thought they were. But now I knew that by then, they had already started poisoning me. David had already installed the system. Rachel had already calculated the chemical doses. And there they were, smiling, faking love while they carried out my slow death. I also found the birthday card David had drawn when he was 8 years old. "You're the best mom in the world," it said in his childish handwriting. The contrast between that innocent child and the man trying to kill me was unbearable. I took the photograph and the card and put them in my bag, not because I wanted to remember that moment, but because I needed to remember that the people closest to us can be the most dangerous. I heard voices downstairs. Rachel had come down and was talking to Jim. Her voice sounded normal, almost cheerful, as if she wasn't a murderer chatting with the man who had uncovered her crime. I could hear her on the phone with someone, probably her friend Melissa, laughing about something trivial. I went down the stairs as quietly as I could. From the bottom step, I could see Rachel in the kitchen, dressed in pink pajamas and slippers, her hair messy from sleep. She looked so innocent, so vulnerable. "So, the problem was the old pipes after all," she was saying to Jim. "Exactly," he replied in a professional tone. "It's all fixed now. You shouldn't have any more trouble." What a relief. Mom was so worried about that leak. Rachel turned and saw me coming down the stairs with my handbag. "Are you going out, Mom?" The question froze me. How could I lie to her? How could I pretend everything was normal when I knew what she had done? "Yes, I have a few errands to run," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Do you want me to come with you? I don't have any plans today." The offer terrified me. What would happen if I went out with her? Had she planned to do something if she suspected I had discovered their plan? No, that's not necessary. It's just boring bank stuff. Jim approached with his toolbox. "Well, Mrs. Hayes, my work here is done. You shouldn't have any more problems." I understood it was his way of telling me it was time to go. "How much do I owe you?" I asked, playing along. $75. I took the money from my purse and handed it to him, our eyes meeting for a moment. In his gaze, I saw determination and protection. "Thank you for everything," I said, and the words had a much deeper meaning than Rachel could understand. "My pleasure to help, ma'am." Jim headed for the front door, and I followed, feeling Rachel's eyes on us. "Are you sure you don't want me to come, Mom? You look a little pale." I turned to look at her one last time. My younger daughter, the baby I had held in my arms, nursed when she had a fever, comforted during her childhood nightmares. Now I saw her with completely new eyes, and what I saw terrified me. "I'm fine, dear. I'll be back later." "I love you, Mom," she said with a sweet smile. The words that once would have filled my heart with joy now sounded like poison. How could she say she loved me while she was slowly killing me? "I love you too," I lied, because I didn't know what else to do. I walked out of the house that had been my home for 35 years, not knowing if I would ever be able to return. Once outside, the fresh air hit my face like a revelation. I hadn't realized how suffocating that environment had become until I escaped it. Jim walked quickly to his truck parked in front of my house, and I followed him on legs that still trembled. "Get in," he said, opening the passenger door. "We need to get away from here before your daughter suspects anything." I got into the vehicle, clutching my handbag to my chest like a life raft. Jim started the engine, and we began to drive away from my neighborhood. I looked in the side mirror and saw my house growing smaller in the distance. The house where I had been happy, where I had cried, where I had raised my children, where I had almost died without knowing it. "Where are we going?" I asked in a hoarse voice. "To a safe place where we can think clearly," Jim replied, keeping his eyes on the road. "There's a coffee shop about 15 blocks from here. We can sit down, talk about the next steps, and call the authorities." "The authorities? You mean the police?" Yes, ma'am. What we discovered constitutes attempted murder. This isn't something we can handle on our own. The word murder echoed in my head. My children weren't just ungrateful or greedy. They were potential killers. Killers who had been living with me, eating my food, pretending to care about my well-being, while meticulously carrying out my death. We arrived at the coffee shop, a cozy little place with wooden tables and the aroma of fresh coffee. Jim chose a table in the back, away from the windows and near a rear exit. When I realized he was thinking strategically about escape routes, the reality of my situation hit me again. A young waitress approached our table. "What can I get for you?" "2 coffees, please," said Jim, "and maybe something sweet for the lady. She's had a rough day." The waitress nodded and walked away. Jim waited until we were alone before continuing. "Mrs. Hayes, I need to tell you something. I lost my mother 5 years ago. She died of cancer, but for months before her diagnosis, she complained of strange symptoms that doctors couldn't explain. Extreme fatigue, respiratory problems, general weakness. It was only after she died that we discovered my brother had been stealing money from her bank accounts and tampering with her medication." "Oh my God," I whispered. "I couldn't save my mother because I didn't see the signs in time. But when I saw what was happening in your house, I knew I had a second chance to do the right thing." His words moved me deeply. Here was a stranger risking his time and possibly his safety to help an elderly woman he had just met that morning. "But there's something else you need to understand," Jim continued. "The money. When my husband died, he left a considerable life insurance policy. Plus, I have a lifetime of savings. And this house, it's worth a lot now that the neighborhood has been gentrified. Between the policy, the savings, and the property value, close to $750,000. Jim nodded gravely. "That's a sum that could motivate desperate people to do terrible things." My phone buzzed. It was a text from Rachel. "Mom, is everything okay? You've been out longer than usual." I showed the message to Jim. His expression hardened. "They're already monitoring your movements. Text her back that you're fine, but you got held up at the bank." I typed the reply Jim suggested, my fingers trembling on the screen. "This means we need to act fast," Jim said after I sent the message. "Once they suspect something is wrong, they could get rid of the device and destroy all the evidence." "What do you suggest we do?" "I'll go back to your house this afternoon under the pretext of checking for any additional leaks. I'll take detailed pictures of the device and, if possible, samples of the chemicals. Then we call the police with solid evidence." Jim drove me to a modest but clean hotel downtown, far from my neighborhood and any place my children might look for me. "Harborview Inn," the sign read. While he spoke with the receptionist, I sat on one of the lobby armchairs, clutching my purse and trying to process that my life had completely changed in a matter of hours. "Room 312, Jim said, handing me the key. "It's in my name, so if anyone asks for you, they won't find you." The room was small but comfortable. A single bed, a desk, a chair, and a window overlooking the main street. Jim checked the room carefully, making sure the windows had locks and the door had a double bolt. "Keep the door locked at all times," he instructed. "Don't open it for anyone but me. If you need anything, call room service." "When are you going back to my house?" "In about 2 hours. I'll tell them I got a call from another client complaining of similar issues, and I want to verify that my repair at their house is holding up. They won't suspect anything. It's common practice in my profession to double-check complicated jobs." After Jim left, I was alone in the hotel room. The silence was overwhelming. For decades, I had been used to the constant noise of a full house. Now, in this silent room, my mind finally had space to fully process what I had discovered. I sat on the bed and took out 2 pieces of paper from the desk drawer. I began to write letters by hand to David and Rachel. In the letters, I wrote about all the beautiful memories, about the love that still remained, about the pain of betrayal. I wrote about how I had sold my wedding ring, the only sentimental item from my husband, to pay for Rachel's college tuition when she studied chemistry. The same knowledge she now used to poison me. I wrote about working 2 jobs after my husband died to support David's failed business venture, only to have him gamble away everything and fall into debt. I ended both letters with the same words. I loved you with everything I had. I wish that had been enough. I folded the 2 letters and put them in my bag. I would never send them, but I needed to write them. It was my way of saying goodbye to the children I thought I had. My phone rang, startling me. It was David. "Hi, Mom. Rachel says you've been out all day. Is everything okay?" His voice sounded tense, as if he were holding back some emotion. "Yes, honey. I just had things to do." "What kind of things? It's strange you didn't tell us you'd be out for so long." "Since when do I need to report my movements to my children?" I replied, trying to sound normal but firm. There was an awkward pause. "You're right. It's just we worry when you change your routine." "My routine?" "Well, you're normally home in the afternoons. You make dinner at the same time every day." I realized they had been monitoring my schedule much more closely than I had noticed. It was to make sure I was in my room during the times of highest poison concentration. The phone rang at 6 in the evening. It was Jim. "Mrs. Hayes, I have the evidence, but there's something else you need to know. Can you meet me in the hotel lobby in 10 minutes? "What did you find?" "It's better if we talk in person. And ma'am, prepare yourself for something disturbing." I went down to the lobby with my heart in my throat. Jim was sitting in the same armchair where I had waited before, but his expression was even more serious than in the morning. He had a folder and a digital camera in his hands. "What happened?" I asked, sitting across from him. "I got detailed pictures of the device," he said, opening the folder. "But while I was documenting everything, I heard your children talking in the kitchen. They stayed there thinking I was in the basement working." He showed me the photographs. They were clear, detailed images of the system I had seen that morning. The tubes, the chemical containers, the digital timers, everything documented from multiple angles. "These photos are solid evidence," he continued, "but what I heard is even more important." "What did you hear?" Jim leaned forward, lowering his voice, even though we were in a secluded corner of the lobby. "Your son David was telling Rachel that you had been acting strangely today, that your answers to their questions were evasive. They already suspected something." "Yes, but there's more. Rachel said they needed to speed up the timeline, that they couldn't risk waiting another 2 months." I felt like I had been punched in the chest. "Speed up? How?" David mentioned something about Plan B. He said they had a second option that would be quicker but riskier. "What kind of Plan B?" They didn't give specifics, but Rachel mentioned something about making it look like a household accident, a fire, or a fall down the stairs. The implications terrified me. If they could no longer kill me slowly with poison, they were willing to resort to more direct and violent methods. "They also said something about the money," Jim continued. "Apparently, David has gambling debts of almost $95,000, and Rachel isn't going to get anything from the divorce because her ex-husband found out she was having an affair." The pieces of the puzzle fell into place horribly. It wasn't just general greed. They were both financially desperate, gambling debts. David owed money to loan sharks who weren't exactly understanding about late payments. Rachel mentioned they had been pressuring him, threatening physical violence, and Rachel's divorce. Apparently, her ex-husband hired a private investigator who documented her infidelity. Under the divorce laws, that means she gets no financial settlement. Suddenly, it all made a horrible kind of sense. David didn't just want my money. He desperately needed it to save his own life. And Rachel had lost all hope of financial stability after her divorce. "But there's something else I found," Jim said, taking more photos out of the folder. "After they finished talking, they went down to the basement together. They wanted to verify that the device was still working correctly. I hid in a corner and watched them. Mrs. Hayes, what I saw confirmed that this has been going on for months." He showed me a photo of a notebook he had managed to capture from a distance. Pages filled with dates, times, and handwritten notes. "What is that?" "A detailed log of your response to the poison. Dates when you seemed more tired, when you complained of headaches, when you had trouble sleeping. They've been documenting everything as if it were a science experiment. The photos showed entries like, March 15th, Mom complained of dizziness after lunch. March 22nd, slept until 10 in the morning, very unusual. April 3rd, forgot dentist appointment, mental confusion increasing. They've been monitoring my decline, I whispered, feeling nauseous, and adjusting the doses based on their observations. Look at this entry from last month. He pointed to a line that read, Reduce nighttime concentration, symptoms too obvious. David suggests switching to morning release when she's alone. They were refining the process to make sure no one else noticed what was happening to me. Exactly, but ma'am, there's something even more disturbing. Jim turned to the next page of photos. It showed a list written in Rachel's handwriting. What does it say? It's a list of symptoms they expected you to develop and a timeline for when they planned for each one to appear. I read the list with growing horror. Weeks 1 to 4, general fatigue attributable to aging. Weeks 5 to 8, memory problems, mild confusion. Weeks 9 to 12, respiratory difficulties, physical weakness. Weeks 13 to 16, severe deterioration, possible hospitalization. Weeks 17 to 20, organ failure, apparently natural death. We're in week 14, Jim said grimly. According to their timeline, you should already be hospitalized, dying slowly while doctors tried to figure out what mysterious illness had struck you. But I'm still here, I said, feeling a fierce determination growing in my chest. Their perfect plan failed. Yes, but now they know something went wrong, and desperate people do desperate things. My phone vibrated. It was a message from David. Mom, the plumber came back to check his work. He says everything is perfect. When are you coming home? They already know you're not where you should be, Jim said, reading the message over my shoulder, and they're starting to panic. What do we do now? We call the police immediately. With these photos and what I heard, we have enough evidence to get them arrested. But before I could answer, my phone rang. It was Rachel. Answer it, Jim said, but be very careful what you say. Mom, where are you? David and I are very worried. Her voice sounded different. There was a tension that hadn't been there in previous conversations. I'm fine, dear. Why so worried? It's just the plumber said something strange when he came to check his work. He mentioned you had been asking about ventilation problems in the basement, but you never mentioned any ventilation problems. My heart sped up. Jim had made up that story as an explanation for exploring the basement, but now it had backfired. I don't remember saying that, I lied. Mom, is there something you're not telling us? Is there a problem with the house that we don't know about? I could hear David talking in the background, but I couldn't make out the words. Everything is fine, Rachel. It was just a misunderstanding with the plumber. Where are you right now? We can come pick you up. The question sounded like a threat disguised as an offer of help. That's not necessary. I have a ride. But Mom, it's already 7 in the evening. You never stay out this late without letting us know. Before I could respond, David's voice replaced Rachel's. Mom, you need to come home right now. His tone had changed completely. He was no longer the concerned son. He sounded authoritarian, almost threatening. You said you were running errands at the bank and shopping, but the bank closed at 5 and you haven't bought anything. Where have you really been? I don't have to explain my movements to you, David. Yes, you do, especially when you start acting so suspicious and strange. The plumber told us you were asking very specific questions about ventilation systems, questions that someone would only ask if they suspected something was wrong. My blood ran cold. They had put the pieces together faster than we expected. I don't know what you're talking about. Mom, come home now. We can talk about this as a family. And what if I don't want to come home? There was a long, charged pause. When David spoke again, his voice was ice cold. Then we'll have to come and get you. I hung up the phone with trembling hands. Jim looked at me with a grave expression. Mrs. Hayes, we need to call the police right now. Your children know you've discovered something, and they're willing to take drastic measures to silence you." But before he could dial, my phone vibrated again. This time, it was a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Mrs. Hayes, we know where you are. Harborview Inn, downtown, room 312. You have 10 minutes to come down to the lobby before we come up to get you." Terror completely paralyzed me. "Jim, look at this." Another message arrived, this time from Rachel. "Mom, we know you're at the Harborview Inn. We don't want to hurt you. We just want to talk, but if you don't come down voluntarily, David is going to come up to your room, and he's very upset right now." "They're here," I whispered, looking towards the lobby windows. "They're somewhere nearby watching us." Jim stood up immediately. "Let's go. There's a back exit through the hotel restaurant's kitchen. We can get out without being seen." As we walked quickly towards the back of the hotel, my phone rang again. This time, I answered without looking at who it was. "Mom, why are you running from us?" It was Rachel's voice, but it sounded different. There was a coldness in her tone I had never heard before. "We just want to protect you. You've been acting very strangely lately, and we're worried about your mental health." "My mental health is perfectly fine, Rachel. What's not fine is what you two have been doing in my house." There was a long pause. When Rachel spoke again, she had dropped all pretense of filial concern. "What do you think we've been doing, Mom?" "I think you two have been trying to kill me slowly to inherit my money. And I think when you realized I found out, you decided to speed up your plans." "Those are very serious accusations, Mom. Accusations that might suggest you're suffering from senile paranoia." The way she said senile paranoia made me understand immediately what their defense strategy would be. They would say I was a confused old woman, possibly with early dementia, who had misinterpreted normal situations and developed conspiracy theories about her own children. "I'm not confused, Rachel. I saw the device in the basement. I saw the tubes connected to my room's ventilation system. I saw the chemicals and the timers." "What device, Mom?" "There's no device in the basement, just normal plumbing and the ventilation system we installed during the renovation." Now I understood why they had insisted so much on me coming home. They had used the hours since my disappearance to dismantle the entire system and eliminate the evidence. "Jim has pictures," I said, glancing at him as we continued moving towards the back exit. "Jim? You mean the plumber?" "Mom, that man is a complete stranger. Why would you believe him over your own children? Doesn't it seem strange that a plumber you'd never seen before today is suddenly filling your head with paranoid ideas about your family?" Her logic was diabolically clever. To any outside observer, it would indeed seem strange that an elderly woman would trust a stranger more than her own children. The line went dead. Jim and I had reached the hotel's back door. He opened it carefully and looked into the alley. We started walking quickly down the alley, but when we reached the corner, we saw Jim's truck, and someone was standing next to it. David. We stopped immediately and stepped back into the shadows. David had his phone in one hand and what looked like a tire iron in the other. He was looking down the alley, clearly waiting for us. "We can call the police from here," Jim said, dialing 911 on his phone. But before he could complete the call, we heard footsteps behind us. We turned and saw Rachel blocking our way out of the alley. In her hands, she held something that made my blood run cold, a large syringe filled with a clear liquid.